For many men over 60, the thought of intimacy can bring with it a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Not because the desire is faded, but because the body doesn't always respond the way it used to, and what was once effortless and spontaneous might now require preparation, patience, and a completely different understanding of what it means to feel confident and connected in the bedroom. Which is why one of the most powerful tools you can give yourself as an older man isn't a pill or a potion, but a mental and physical shift that begins well before the clothes come off. Because what truly prevents disappointment in the bedroom at this age isn't just about achieving an erection or lasting longer. It's about setting the stage in your mind and body so that intimacy becomes fulfilling, not frustrating, and that begins with one specific practice that most men completely overlook. Yet has been proven by urologists and sexual health experts to dramatically improve performance, confidence, and satisfaction. And that is this: learning to engage in intentional pre-intimacy preparation. Not a mechanical routine, but a mindful ritual that addresses blood flow, emotional connection, mental focus, and physical readiness all at once. And this ritual begins with understanding that sexual response is now more about the brain than ever before, because testosterone levels naturally decline. Nitric oxide production decreases, and stress or overthinking can block arousal in a split second. So, instead of jumping straight into sex like in younger years, the man who wants to succeed after 60 must take 15 to 30 minutes beforehand to create the right internal conditions, starting with gentle, deep breathing exercises that calm the nervous system, open blood vessels, and bring oxygen-rich blood to the lower extremities, which is essential because a relaxed parasympathetic state is what allows for a healthy erection, not tension or pressure or rushing. And in this space, you then consciously slow everything down, not just physically, but mentally, by removing distractions, releasing performance anxiety, and mentally grounding yourself in the present moment. And this mental quieting doesn't make you less manly. It actually reawakens the most powerful part of your masculinity, the ability to be fully present, fully attuned, and deeply in sync with your partner's emotional and physical energy. Because that is what truly leads to satisfaction at this age, not mere mechanics, but connection, confidence, and presence. And this is also where physical preparation matters, not just in the form of a warm shower or massage to stimulate circulation, but through specific pelvic floor exercises, also called Kegels, which most men wrongly believe are only for women, when in fact strong pelvic muscles are key for erectile strength, control, and stamina. And doing just a few Kegels a day in the week leading up to intimacy, squeezing the same muscles used to stop urination midstream, can lead to significant improvements in sexual performance without drugs or devices. And pairing this with a short stretching or light yoga session beforehand can make a noticeable difference, because flexibility and mobility directly impact blood flow and comfort during sex, which is often overlooked but deeply important for older adults who may have joint stiffness or muscle tension that blocks pleasure. And while these habits may seem unrelated to sex at first glance, the reality is that a man who takes time to breathe deeply, stretch, engage his pelvic floor, and mentally focus is creating a physiological environment where testosterone can work more efficiently, where cortisol and adrenaline don't interfere, and where arousal can build naturally, not be forced through pressure or panic. And this holistic approach not only avoids disappointment, it transforms the experience from a performance into a shared connection, where you're no longer afraid of what might go wrong, because you've already done the work to get your mind and body on your side. And in this state, intimacy becomes not only more satisfying, but also more deeply bonding, because your partner feels your confidence, your calm, and your attunement. And that's the secret no one tells you. that the best sex over 60 doesn't come from trying harder, but from preparing smarter and learning to tune your body like an instrument so that when the moment comes, it doesn't just work, it sings. Once you've accepted that intimacy after 60 begins long before the bedroom door closes, the next critical step in avoiding disappointment is understanding the role of blood flow and circulation in your ability to perform. Because what most older men don't realize is that the biggest threat to their sex life isn't necessarily low testosterone, but impaired vascular health, which quietly builds up over decades and starts to manifest as weaker erections, longer arousal times, and less physical sensitivity, all of which can feel like your body is betraying you. But in truth, it's a natural physiological signal that your arteries and capillaries, especially those responsible for engorging the penile tissue, are no longer operating at peak performance. So the solution isn't to just pop a pill before sex, but to adopt daily and pre-intimacy habits that improve microcirculation specifically to the pelvic region. And that starts with something as simple as hydration, because when your body is even mildly dehydrated, your blood becomes thicker and your heart has to work harder to deliver oxygen where it's needed, which includes the tissues involved in arousal. So drinking at least a glass of water 30 minutes before sexual activity can actually make a visible difference in vascular response. And to take it a step further, adding natural vasodilators to your diet, such as beet juice, dark chocolate, or foods rich in L-arginine and L-citrulline on a regular basis, not just right before sex, helps relax blood vessel walls and improve blood flow over time, which is essential because the ability to get and maintain an erection is fundamentally a circulatory event, not just a hormonal one. And even something as overlooked as walking briskly for 10 to 15 minutes before intimacy can stimulate endorphins, increase nitric oxide, and promote blood movement toward the lower extremities in a way that primes your body for physical engagement. And while that might seem too simple to matter, studies have shown that light cardio activity shortly before sex leads to significantly improved erectile function in men over 60, not to mention the mental clarity that comes from moving your body and releasing tension. And when you pair that with breath work and visualization, imagining the upcoming moment not as a performance you must ace, but as a shared experience to enjoy, you shift your nervous system out of fight or flight and into rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic mode, necessary for arousal, lubrication, and climax, because the male's sexual response is completely disrupted by adrenaline and anxiety, which is why so many men over 60 find themselves mentally eager but physically unresponsive. And instead of blaming yourself or your partner, you must understand that intimacy at this age is an entirely new skill set, one that involves preparation, awareness, and honoring the natural pace of your body. Because in truth, your ability to perform doesn't disappear with age. It simply asks you to approach it differently, to become more intentional and attuned, and to treat your body like a trusted partner rather than a machine that should obey your command on demand. And this includes your approach to arousal itself, because many men are conditioned to think of arousal as something immediate and visual, when in fact the older male body thrives on slow build-up, gradual stimulation. An emotional context, which means that one of the best things you can do before sex is actually spend time with your partner in a non-sexual way, talking, laughing, touching gently, so that your emotional connection acts as the ignition for physical desire. Because at this stage of life, intimacy is less about friction and more about flow, and that flow begins hours, sometimes days before actual sexual contact, which means your success in the bedroom starts the moment you decide to make space for it in your day, your mood, your thoughts, and your habits. And if that sounds like work, it is, but it's the kind of work that leads to greater confidence, deeper intimacy, and the removal of that fear that so many older men carry, that fear of disappointing their partner or feeling inadequate, when in fact, what your partner desires most is your presence, your intentionality, your calm attention. Not perfection or youth or performance, but real connection. And the more you give yourself the tools to show up fully, physically, emotionally, and energetically, the more. These disappointments turn into powerful, satisfying experiences that remind you that your age doesn't define your capacity for love, pleasure, or intimacy. Now that we've covered the importance of mindset, blood flow, and preparation, the third critical component to avoiding disappointment in the bedroom after 60 is understanding the role of sensory engagement. Because as testosterone naturally declines and nerve sensitivity reduces over time, many men are surprised to find that the same touch, the same positions, the same pace that once triggered instant pleasure now feels dull or underwhelming. And this isn't a failure or a sign of dysfunction. It's simply the body's way of asking for more deliberate stimulation, more time, and more sensory involvement. And the most successful men in their 60s and beyond are those who stop chasing the mechanical routine they had at 30 and start cultivating new ways to connect physically, which might include using warm massage oils, exploring erogenous zones that were previously overlooked, experimenting with rhythm and tempo, and above all, practicing slow touch without the pressure to immediately perform, because one of the hidden killers of intimacy at this age is the mental rush to get it done. A performance mindset that backfires by increasing anxiety and interrupting the natural buildup of desire. And instead of rushing, learning to draw out anticipation can reignite excitement for both partners, especially when paired with verbal affirmation, because what so few men realize is that vocal connection. Saying what you like, expressing what feels good, asking your partner what they enjoy can activate the emotional and psychological arousal pathways that become even more important after 60, when physical triggers alone might not be enough to sustain momentum. And this is also the perfect time to embrace tools that enhance intimacy without shame, such as lubricants designed specifically for older skin, which becomes thinner and drier over time, especially in postmenopausal women. Meaning discomfort or dryness isn't a rejection, it's biology, and when you proactively address these changes, you demonstrate care and wisdom, which only deepens the emotional bond. And if needed, don't hesitate to explore devices or positioning aids that support comfort and ease, because when the body feels safe and supported, it responds with more willingness. And that includes your own body too, because at this stage, flexibility, joint comfort, and physical ease all matter more than ever. And something as simple as placing a soft pillow under the hips or supporting the back with a wedge can transform the entire experience from awkward or strained to deeply satisfying. And it's also important to talk about the role of scent, lighting, and ambience, because as we age, our brains crave familiarity and comfort, but they also respond positively to novelty. So even changing the lighting to a warmer tone, using a familiar cologne, or playing gentle background music can activate multiple senses and bring the mind into a more receptive, aroused state, which is essential because arousal isn't just about blood flow. It's about brain chemistry, and anything that signals safety, warmth, and sensuality to the nervous system sets the stage for a more powerful and confident sexual connection. And here's a powerful secret that most older men never hear. Foreplay for men isn't just a bonus, it's a necessity after 60, and the more you invest in exploring your own pleasure without rushing, the more your body will respond. And this includes allowing your partner to explore you too, because many men over 60 have never fully received touch, they've only given it. And when you let yourself relax into receiving, when you let go of the idea that you must always lead or initiate, You open the door to a more balanced, emotionally fulfilling connection, and this shift away from pressure and toward presence allows arousal to rise naturally without fear of failure or anxiety about outcome. And that's where real confidence is born, not from being perfect, but from being fully engaged, fully alive in the moment, and deeply attuned to yourself and your partner in a way that no pill or product can replicate. Because while medications can support the mechanics of performance, it's these deeper layers of preparation, stimulation, and presence that make the difference between just having sex and experiencing real, intimate, soul-nourishing connection that leaves both of you feeling seen, valued, and satisfied. Finally, the fourth and perhaps most overlooked element that men over 60 must do before intimacy to avoid disappointment is initiating honest communication. Not just about physical readiness, but about expectations, emotions, insecurities, and desires. Because one of the most tragic mistakes older men make is believing they need to silently endure confusion, frustration, or fear about sexual performance, thinking it's shameful or weak to speak up, when in reality, open dialogue can instantly dissolve tension, align partners emotionally, and set a more realistic, relaxed tone for what follows. And many couples in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s report that their most satisfying sexual encounters happened after they dared to speak vulnerably, even if it was simply saying, "I'm a little nervous tonight," or "let's take our time," because transparency builds trust. And trust is the real aphrodisiac at this age. When bodies have changed, hormones have shifted, and the old playbook no longer applies. Yet so many men try to fake it, hoping to impress or conceal their struggles, only to find themselves crushed by disappointment or misunderstood by a loving partner who would have gladly supported them if only they knew what was going on. And this is where courage comes in, because real masculine strength after 60 isn't about hardness or dominance. It's about showing up emotionally, about being present without hiding. And this requires letting go of outdated ideas about manhood and embracing a new definition that includes sensitivity, humor, curiosity, and emotional depth. And when you do this, when you speak openly about what you need, what excites you, what worries you, you give your partner permission to do the same. And together you create a safer, more compassionate sexual space where both of you can experiment without judgment, adjust without embarrassment, and explore without fear of failure, which ironically makes successful intimacy far more likely. And it's in this environment of safety that touch becomes more responsive, that arousal becomes more reliable, and that desire becomes more durable, even in the face of physical challenges. And if you've ever felt like your sex life is behind you, or that your partner has lost interest, the solution might not be in a bottle or a pill. It might be in a conversation you haven't had yet. And once that door is opened, many couples find their connection reignites in surprising ways, not by going back to how things were, but by creating something richer, slower, and more meaningful than ever before. And one final truth you need to remember is that sexuality is not a performance. It's a language, and just like any language, it evolves, it deepens with time, and it adapts to the way you feel, the way you move, and the way you connect. So the more you learn to listen, not just to your partner, but to your own body, your own rhythms, your own comfort zones and boundaries, the more mastery you develop. And that mastery brings confidence, not from pretending to be 25 again, but from fully owning who you are now, with wisdom, with patience, with creativity, and with a deep desire to share something beautiful, not prove something mechanical. And if you take the time before intimacy to breathe, to connect, to prepare physically and emotionally, and to speak honestly, then you won't just avoid disappointment. You'll set the stage for experiences that nourish your relationship, energize your spirit, and bring back the spark that so many men think is lost forever after 60, but which in truth is simply waiting patiently to be rediscovered in a new form, one that matches your current body, your evolving heart, and your desire to live not just longer, but fuller, deeper, and more joyfully connected than ever before.